The greatest multiplier in any business is developing other people. If you can build and develop those other people, you're going to see everything else start to fall into place.
Hey, what's going on, all you Keep the Changers? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're so glad you're with us today. Hey, you know what I find? I heard a man say a long time ago that his business exploded when he got collaboration with other people. And I find, as a Lone Ranger for a number of years, that even joining Maxwell Leadership got me just different personalities and different groups of people that came in that would give me new ideas. About 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call from one of these gentlemen about what they were doing with their company, Visperio. And we had a great conversation. And then we had a second conversation just about how we can make a mark in automotive and how we can change lives. So because I was so impressed with both of these guys, I asked them to be on the podcast, and they were very nice to say yes. So today we're going to talk about Visperio. We're going to talk about these two partners. We're going to talk about their business that they're building, and we're going to talk about leadership in the dealership. So welcome to Keep the Change. Welcome to Kyle Newsom, Tom Fennen. Thank you for being at Keep the Change headquarters today. And welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Bart. I really appreciate the opportunity to, talk with you. And obviously, we've had a great couple of conversations so far. So I know Tom and I are excited to, have this conversation today.
Well, I absolutely appreciate the forum and, learning from each other, which is always, what we love, within, our business, but also, from these interactions for sure.
Yeah. Tom, I have to tell you, I told you this last time, and sometimes I have Tourette's of the mouth. But if you're watching this on YouTube, folks, or on BartNollenberger.com, you'll see two handsome dudes, right? You just will. And Tom, I don't know how he does it, but he's got this thing going on where I don't know how you do it, but your hair
natural.
is
It's
so
natural. I got very thin hallways.
That's hilarious. Yeah. You'll know what we mean when you see this on the screen. It's when he says, always, he's got it coiffed perfectly. Mine's flopping everywhere. Yeah, it's funny. Let's talk business. Talk to me about you guys. And again, thank you for doing this. Kyle, since I met you first, I'm going to let you go first and tell us a little bit about Visperio. Tell us about Kyle Newsom. Tell us about your history in this business.
Yeah. So, a little bit about me, right? I spent about 2 decades in this business, and primarily, before early on, I kind of grew up in the business. I always say, I was kind of born into it because my family owned and operated multiple different businesses growing up, but a couple of those businesses were automotive businesses. So we had a mechanic shop, we had body shops, right? We were entwined into that community. So that's what I knew growing up. And then, fast forward, I start working for dealerships, and you know what happens when you start working for dealerships, you basically can never leave that life. It seems like it's kind of sucks you back in, which is it's a great career, right? It's an amazing career filled with a ton of opportunities. And I started working for the Van Tile Group, and kind of a fun story. Tom was the one that actually kind of recruited me over to Van Tile. So I met Tom, over a decade ago at this point, right? But Tom's the one that, I met at a Starbucks coffee shop. We had a great conversation. Next thing you know, I'm working for the Van Tile Group, and then went through the acquisition with Berkshire Hathaway Automotive. And I've always spent my time in that fixed ops. So I've always been in that fixed ops environment over the dealership. And I've really enjoyed, growing, and I've had some amazing experiences, met some really neat people along the way, and really found the passion for just helping people. Like that was it. The moment that I realized that when I started investing in the people and I stopped focusing so much on the numbers necessarily and start putting a little more effort into the individual, well, that's when it all changed for me, right? And so in 2023, we started the company Visperio, and it's myself, Tom Fennen, and we have a third partner, Vic Keller, and we all three came together and built Visperio to be something different when it comes to really professional development within the dealership. We wanted something that really focused on empowering those individuals that are there every day. And that's from the service manager, right, to those service advisors, to those technicians, those shop foremans, everybody in that fixed operations department. Our goal is to really give them all the tools and the resources they need without the disruption, right? So there's so much disruption that can happen, especially when we view kind of those traditional training models. We really wanted to do something different to where, hey, you have this tool, you have this resource that you can self-consume. We have the accountability pieces built in to kind of help you guide along the way. Because I know for me, I need some accountability, right? I need a little bit of help. I might have all the tools available, but hey, I might need a little bit of a push as well. And so we've really spent the last, almost 2 years now, right, building and developing and working with dealership clients. And so that's where we are today. I'll let kind of Tom kick it off a little bit. He's got an amazing story, and we'll go from there.
I'm going to read a couple of these things from your website. It talks about your mission, fellas, to deliver exceptional professional services and innovative technology solutions to automotive dealerships, providing unlimited access to exclusive insights, hands-on knowledge, expert guidance, empowering dealerships to overcome limitations, unlock their full potential, and achieve success. That's a lot to break down. It's very powerful. And Kyle, your quote under here, it's not about finding a single silver bullet, but discovering the power of 100 golden BBs, 100 golden BBs. Yeah. So, and Tom, who we are going to have the opportunity to hear from in a moment, says if we can guide people to what they are capable of, we can achieve amazing results. I love that. And that's beautiful. So Tom, tell me about you. Tell me about how you ended up where you are today. And let's go. Let's hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, grew up in the Pennsylvania area. I had two, what I would call super examples of work ethic in both my dad and my mom. My mom actually got me into the car business, and I'll tell that story here in a second. But she started out at a small Pontiac store in Philadelphia as a payroll clerk and eventually worked her way up as a CEO of a company in the Philadelphia tri-state area. And
which one?
Sussman Automotive.
Okay. Well, that's impressive.
Yeah. So she, oversaw that. They also, created their vertical integration tools with, their insurance piece and all that. So she guided all that process. So, obviously a great example there. My dad actually grew up in the roofing business, union roofer, with his brothers in Philadelphia. So, obviously very hard work, but both managed to, provide an amazing, living, for us as a family. In 1992, I graduated college with a psychology and economics degree. And what do you do with that degree? Well, you go to parts, apparently. So actually I got to the age where my parents said, hey, you got to provide your own insurance. You're out of school. So, hey, where can I get insurance and get some stability? Well, the car business, right? So started out in a Honda parts store. At the same time, I did not think that, hey, this is for me. Hey, I graduated college. I don't need to be in the retail car business. Of course, not really having a great understanding, even though with, the lineage that my mom provided, really what the opportunity there was, hey, I'm in parts. This is a job, right? I am getting insurance. And at the time I was going to Villanova at grad school because what I was really passionate about, was really psychology in the workforce, labor relations, stuff like that. So I was doing that. And I always tell this in any interaction I have with, people that we interact with, when it was in parts, they discovered I had a personality and they kicked me out and put me in service. So, I guess I didn't put people on hold too often. So, all the parts folks out there kind of get a little synergy with that. So fast forward, I spent about 10 years in the Sussman Auto Group organization. I worked my way up, through the ranks. And that's where I learned a valuable lesson of you really need to let people know what your aspirations are sometimes in this business. I was passed over for a manager role, and I was very looking at it from outward, hey, what's wrong with them? Why don't they see how hard I'm working? Don't they see the success that I'm doing in my position? Why didn't I get that opportunity? Well, first of all, they didn't know that I wanted that opportunity. And I didn't ask, hey, what are the expectations of what I need to do to get there, right? So that was a really good lesson. So from there, I actually got my first service manager opportunity at a Pontiac Isuzu store, two amazing, franchises at the time. Then got recruited after about 3 years there with the Van Tile Group in 2004. One of my primary mentors, Russ Aronson, who is still with Larry Van Tile this day in his new acquisition strategy, spent about 9.5 years at the store level, did a lot of really good things there, and got the opportunity to work in a platform role with the Van Tiles, which had us move to the Dallas area where we live today. I think June, it'll be almost 13 or 14 years. So spent about 11 years there, overseeing 23 dealers in 6 states, and, learned a lot from a lot of amazing people, from top, bottom. And, I think what's great about this business and what really allowed me to, I think, create a career is I enjoy everything from the top to the bottom. And what I mean by that is everybody really brings value into the equation, whether it's a lot attendant, whether it's a cashier, whether it's the owner of the business, whether it's the factory folks, they all have their own perspectives. And I think really collaborating and thinking that way of, well, hey, how can we blend all of this and, really create a really good culture and atmosphere. So so that's kind of the short version, I guess. But yeah, great to be in the car business. And I always tell the story when I was going to Villanova, while I was working at the Lincoln Mercury store. That's where I wound up getting moved to service after parts. I knew I had to, if I wanted to further my career in labor relations, I had to get a law degree. And at the time, I didn't like to read. So I thought that was kind of a bad combination, not liking to read and having to go to law school. So, I think all in all, things have worked out the way they should have.
Well, that's impressive. Thank you for sharing that. I was thinking, Kyle, when you were talking about once you get in, it's hard to get out, right? Hotel California, right? Sometimes that's this business, isn't it? Yeah. I like you all, I've been in it a long time, and family was in it, and I drifted that way because it seemed like the thing to do. And I went to college for radio and broadcasting, and wasn't the best college student. And then I went to my dad and said, hey, I want to sell cars. In between there, I lifeguarded on the beach. And I realized that might not be a long-time career. So
I had the same experience, Brad.
Did you? Some days, what's so funny is I'd be sitting in a bar after my day and somebody'd say, what do you do? I said, I'm a lifeguard. How did today go? Oh, I was 2 for 3. And they said, what? You're a lousy lifeguard. I realized later in selling that 2 for 3 was pretty good, but not very good as a lifeguard. So let's talk leadership, man. You guys came from Van Tile. That's been an organization that process-wise, probably there's none better in the world. They know process on variable and fixed better than anybody I've ever seen. I had an opportunity to work with Travis Holt and do some on a project and do some hiring and training for him at ABC Nissan. And I found it was extremely impressive. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what your history and your belief system in leadership is. And if you've listened to my podcast, I know you guys have, and I thank you for that. You know that I talk a lot about the one-on-ones. I talk a lot about really lifting people up. I talk a lot about who are you? With a psychology degree, Tom, you get this. And what we know is that if we don't know who they are, then how can we help grow them? But we also know if they don't know who they are, they can't grow. So I've been really big recently on emotional intelligence. I've done a lot of work with DISC, and you might hit on this or you don't have to, but because I spent all day yesterday in emotional intelligence, I want to lay the groundwork. I've studied it for a number of years, and there's 4 components. Number 1, self-awareness. And what you guys know in this room is that if we're not self-aware, we're in trouble, right? But the next piece is self-management. There's so many people that we lead that might be aware that they're stupid, but they're not doing anything about it, right? And that obviously is a problem in terms of emotional intelligence. The third piece, though, is social awareness, knowing the room, knowing when you are connecting, knowing when you're not. And that's a gift, man. And then the next piece is relationship management, knowing how to build lasting relationships. My guess is if I did an emotional intelligence assessment with you guys, you'd probably hit the top of the charts on those because of what you're doing in the industry. What we know is that people that are highest in emotional intelligence have more success in terms of culture, in terms of collaboration, and in terms of monetary rewards than anybody else. So if you feel comfortable hitting on that, what that means to you, then let's run with it. But let's go to Tom first, then we'll go to Kyle. We'll mix it up a bit. Tom, tell us about your leadership philosophy, what you've seen in the automobile business. There's a lot of questions here. What you've seen in the automobile business that has been a mistake, and how do we become people that change leadership in dealerships? Go for it.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, right? I think that the biggest issue in current retail, and it's been this way for a long time, is not doing the best job of evaluating what you want to represent, the vision and the culture of what's happening. I think we get into this frenzy of, I have a need immediately. And because this person has XYZ experience, even though I know there's a lot of red flags, they probably aren't going to match well with the current team. But hey, I need what we'll call a body, right? I was actually just on a mentoring call the other day, and that was the term. Hey, we hired a couple of bodies. And I said, well, I think they're team members, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're team members. So I don't really need to do a whole lot of other analysis there to understand the retention issue within that continuum culture. And I think the problem in the business, it moves super fast, right? But there are no less minutes and hours today that there were 20 years ago.
Amen.
Right? And what happens though, we fill this time with what we call busy work, right? We're looking at KPIs, we're running reports, we're answering a million questions, and we don't feel that we have the time to really slow down and try to develop. Right. And I think the core problem there is that we celebrate, I think, in this business, outcomes versus what's happening in between those outcomes. And what I mean about that is there's a lot of things, and you've been in the business a long time, Bart, and you've seen, people being measured, strictly by KPI. And the business has seasonality, right? We call it, I heard this a long time ago, and they say, is it magic or is it me? Right? Even currently, what's happening now on the variable side with the tariff spike, anxiousness, there's a lot of cars getting sold, right? There's a lot of service being had because people are anxious. They don't know what's happening. Well, is that success because we are set up right? We have the right people, we're leading them right, we're coaching, we got great processes, or did the environment? And what happens, we get promoted during those times and we're really not prepared. I think the big thing for me is making sure that I understand the why of why the person where they are, right? What does success look like for them? And asking them enough questions and listening and making sure that I'm present to really make sure that they know why we're doing what we need to do. And what really happens a lot of times when you operate that way, you will learn the gaps that we have in some of the stuff that we do because we're not looking at all of the other angles, because we're not slowing down to have some conversations. And it takes time. It's easier to, I think, fight a fire. It's easier to get really good at turnover. As funny as that sounds, we get really good at that process. We get really good at not acknowledging that, hey, we can really have a better atmosphere, right? We hire people that maybe aren't great for the organization. We talked about that before. But I think the big thing is, making sure everybody understands why we're doing what we're doing. But in order for that to happen is getting their viewpoint of what success looks for them and their family. Hey, why are you a technician? What do you want to achieve? Right? Let's help you get there. And then you can blend in the components of what the department needs to do. Because reality is, if we get everybody to where they would like to be and work to their potential, not what we feel our potential should be, the department's going to win. Yeah. Right. We spend that physical time, with everybody. And that's a big thing. And really developing good understanding of why we're doing things. There's a lot of different methods of measuring, hey, you should do this and why. Well, why would you need 4 other technicians? What is the deep understanding of that? So there's a level of confidence. Because I think the other thing is, and you brought it up earlier, self-awareness. There's a lot of development needing in being confident, but also self-aware, right? Not using that confidence on arrogance, but confident to know when you're wrong and to know where you need input and to know where It's about getting it right versus being right. Something, that we say a lot, but it's important. We're problem solvers. We like to be the one who came up with the solution, but it really becomes, there isn't a longevity of growth within departments when you have that mindset of defending why I believe that my position is right, instead of just, being confident and secure enough to say, okay, let's look at why maybe this isn't the right thing to do.
So excellent. Thank you. It's interesting. There's a couple things. You can get anything you want. You know where I'm going. If you help enough people get what they want, that's what I heard in that.
Yep.
And if we don't know what they want and we don't really connect with that, then we're not going to, if we can't serve them in that, we're not going to really get what we want. But I guess the best way to unpack what you said was that I was doing work with a dealer group, wasn't Van Tile, it was somebody else. And as soon as I would hire them, I was doing variable, I would hire them, interview them, hire them, train them. And within 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, 80% of them were gone. And at first I thought, well, this is job security. I was under a contract. I said, why not? Right. And then I looked and thought, where is the issue? Well, the issue was that the people that were face to face with these folks were all about the process and not the people. And look, I'm a relational guy. Some people are task people, some people are relational people. I get it. And I believe in getting stuff done. I'm a driver, just like you guys. And yet, if we don't have relationships, from what I know right now, it's not a business run by AI yet. It's people. And if we don't have relationships, if we don't know why Billy's coming to work every day, and you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, if we don't know their because, then how are we going to lead them? How are we going to motivate them? They don't want to know how much we know. They want to know how much we care, all of that. But isn't that our piece? I mean, it goes back to, if I can help people be better at awareness, management, social awareness, all that, if I can help them be better, now they're better employees at home and they're better, at work and at home. They're better people, right? And I believe in the big scope. That's why we're put on this planet, right? It's not just about the dollar and cents. It's about the people, develop the people, and the result is the monies. So thank you for that. I love what you said about confidence. We have to be confident to say we're wrong. And I had a conversation with some folks not too long ago where I was trying to be right. And in that trying to be right, I got a little defensive. And I wanted to punch the person on the other side of the screen in the nose. It wasn't aggressive, but I was really happy with the way this person expressed something. And 2 days later, it's kind of the way it works for me. I was able to pontificate it. And I thought, wait a minute, I care for this person, this other person. I don't have to be right. I want to care for this person first. And I believe that if we're, as leaders, if we can operate that way, oh my gosh, some might call it soft. I call it leading with love, but which I think is the greatest way we can lead, right? Because that's the strongest stance we can have, is to lead in caring for others with kindness, firmness, accountability, but build them up so that they have a quality of life. So when they're at home, they can brag about who we are. So thanks so much for that, right? And this is your time, not mine, but you got me going on a couple things. Getting it right before being right. I love that. Thank you for that. That's really strong. And being right never really works all the time, right? So Kyle, break that down. Talk to us about some of the mistakes we've made in the past in leadership and some of your philosophies for turning it around so that we can build organizations that are happy customers, happy employees that make more money.
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of great points that have been brought up, and a couple of things kind of sparked listening to, Tom and you talk about it. I think about, actually Gary Vaynerchuk, I just watched a deal. He just said this, but he talks a lot about this, and it's, you have key employees in your organization. Doesn't matter what business it is, but if you don't understand what drives them and what their next 5 years looks like in their own eyes, then you need to go have a 2-hour dinner with them. That's his whole deal. You need to get to know those people. And I think that's one of the big things. And, we talk a lot on our side, one of our big things or slogans, we'll call it, is embrace kindness, ignite greatness. And, we really focus on the kindness piece, that whole embrace kindness. And everybody always asks, right, well, what does it really mean, kindness in that leadership? Because a lot of times it gets mixed, right? We look at nice and then we look at kind. Well, hey, I'm being nice to that individual. Maybe, Jimmy is having an issue. I want to be nice, so I'm not going to say anything. Well, is that really what you should do? Or should you practice kind leadership and really be kind to Jimmy and say, hey, I've kind of noticed this is going on, and then have a genuine one-on-one conversation. Now, you have to have empathy, right? Empathy is something that's a skill, that's a trait that you need, right? And you also need a little bit of that intuition as well, which you kind of touched on earlier, is, hey, understanding that, hey, maybe something's going on. Maybe you need to be a little sensitive to that situation and focus on the person. We see this all the time in the car dealership where, maybe there's something going on to where, just the simple stuff where they've got to drop kids off at school and, they can't be there at that certain time. They need a half-hour window just because of that's what it is. Well, are you going to be stubborn about it, or are you going to work with that individual and come up with something that works for everybody, right? There's a million different ways we can do this to where we can create and really design that environment so it's successful for everybody, right? But I think what happens is we kind of get stuck in these grooves. I know, like, I'm guilty of it, right? When I was a young manager, it was very just, this is the way we're going to do it, because I didn't know any different, right? I just didn't know any better. I was emulating what I've seen in the past from other managers, good or bad, right? Which is a whole nother deal. And I just didn't know it. I didn't have any resources or something to acquire more skills and understanding. I just had to do it over time, right? You're always going to pay for it one way or the other. You can either pay for it through training and development, or you can pay for it over time, right? Well, the time one's kind of a hard path. I'd much rather you do it the other way, obviously. But the big deal there is really just understanding, what does it mean to be a kind leader, right? What does it mean to have those genuine one-on-one conversations? And one of the biggest things I think we can do to change our business tomorrow is just have the conversation with the individuals, set those expectations. And Tom hit on it earlier about really understanding, hey, what's the mission? What's the vision? Where do we really want to go? What is that? What does the end look like? Right? Stephen Covey talks about with the end in mind, right? What does the end look like? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? And sometimes we got to slow down a little bit, and it's a fast-paced environment, and we don't feel like we have time to slow down and really, okay, what do we really want to do? Do we just want to continue fighting fires every day, or do we want to set these people up for success and maybe slow down just a little bit? I'll give you, one great example is, obviously we deal with a lot of different service advisors. We deal with service managers. And, one of the things we run into a lot is with the service advisors, especially, is they're unclear on really what that goal is for the month. Or maybe they have the goal, but they have no idea how they're going to get there or what they really need to do. They just know, hey, at the end of the month, that number better be this, because that's what I'm going for. But what does that really mean? Like, first off, how did we get to the number? Is it an attainable number, right? How do we actually attack it on a daily basis with strategy, And so breaking those things down to really help them and guide them as a leader. The role of the leader is really to be a guide. You're not there to be the guru that knows everything. Sales, service, it doesn't matter. If you're the top dog salesman, you sold 30 cars, whatever it might be, that's great, right? You were a great service advisor, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You could call yourself the guru, but really you want to be the guide. Hey, how do I guide and develop other people? Because the greatest multiplier in your business, and our partner Vic Keller says this all the time, but the greatest multiplier in any business is developing other people. If you can build and develop those other people, you're going to see everything else start to fall into place. So I think those are some of the key things that we really need to focus on, is just understanding the importance of really developing the people, setting the environment up for success. Do they know what they can sell? That's an amazing thing that, one of the first questions we ask is, hey, well, what do you sell on the service drive during write-up? Well, whatever the customer says, a lot of times. Well, what do you offer? Well, I just wait for the technician to offer it, right? Are we up front? Do we have a clear process? No different than going into the sale, going into finance, whatever it might be. There's certain products that we sell. We package different things together based on the customer's specific needs. Well, the same thing happens in service. Well, do they understand when they should sell something, what they sell, right? Do they have some sort of material, a menu? Do they have something that they can use that makes it professional, right? And tailored to that individual? Because at the end of the day, that's what the customers want, right? We should be able to guide that customer as well. That's our job as a service advisor. If you're a service advisor, you're there to advise the customer on what they need, not take the order from the customer because they know they need an oil change, because that's just what they know, right? And so little things like that, or all those little kind of golden BBs you talked about earlier, right? Because we're always looking for that silver bullet. Hey, how do I, apply this new technology, or can I get AI to do this? Well, at the end of the day, what do you do when the customer's standing in front of you? Can you answer the phone? Is 70% of your phone calls status phone calls? Like, there's all those little things that we like to leapfrog over and say, okay, well, wait a minute. If I slow down just a little bit and break down the root cause of this exact issue, right? Tom talked about, solving problems. Sometimes we got to be problem finders, right? We got to find the problem first, because we're just over here with symptoms and we're putting Band-Aids on symptoms all the time. Well, what's the real problem? What's the root cause? Skill in itself, right?
Yeah, so good. And what I'm hearing there is we've got to ask great questions of our people and of ourselves. And that's so good. A lot of things you broke down there. Talked about priorities. And I think that's such a big piece. In Maxwell's book, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0, which is a boot camp that we've done with a lot of different dealerships with fixed and variable folks in the room. Chapter 2, we spent 2 weeks on. And chapter 2 in that book is priorities. And it's really based around what you said, Kyle, you mentioned Covey, begin with the end in mind. It's really based on different quadrants. Are we looking at quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? Quadrant 1 being important and urgent, quadrant 2 being not important and not urgent and important, and so forth. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but what we know is that if we did an inventory, which is the way I started with the people in that group, do an inventory. I've got what's called a 15-minute miracle sheet. Put it in front of you and do an inventory for just a week on where you're spending your time. Every time you're in a little bit of something, write it down and ask yourself, what quadrant is that? Is it quadrant 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Quadrant 4 being not urgent, not important. I mean, that might as well be playing video games, right?
Right.
So, or in a bar drinking at 2 a.m. So the point is that if we live in 4, we're done. If we live in 2, which is important but not urgent, now we're paying not with time, but with training and development, right? And so I love what you said there. I think it's so important for us to look at where are we spending our time, man? Tom, you said it. We've got the same amount of time that they did 50 years ago. But we make the excuse, well, yeah, things are so fast now. Well, they probably are. But what are we doing on a daily basis to be productive with our time? So
I think, in synergy of that, we call it the line out the door poll as a manager, working with dealers all over the country. There's always a line out the door for some reason at some of the locations. And it's what the questions are in that line. Exactly the synergy with the quadrants. We kind of look at it from a priority of 1, 2s, and 3s. 1 is something that they absolutely positively have to handle in their role. 2, they have to be involved and aware of it, but they don't necessarily have to physically execute it. And then 3, we should have empowered, trained, and developed somebody to do this. You should not really be involved in it. And what's interesting, and it takes time, right? That's the first thing, the effort of actually jotting down, what these interactions are. Most of the 3s or 2s could be 3s, and a lot of the 1s are really 2s. And, once you lift a lot of that off of your plate, that's when I think you have some clarity, because, hey, let's face it, everybody has a maximum fill in their cup a day. And when it comes to actually coaching and leading and developing your team, you can't be at the top of your lid, right? If you have that magic moment where somebody's coming to you because they have a concern, and if they had enough energy to come to talk to you about it, it's important to them.
Yes.
Right. And if we're at the absolute zenith of our cup, well, how are we going to really handle that situation? And I'm as guilty as the next person early in my career. I would jack it up, right? And then I'd have to go try to put that situation back together, instead of, one of the things we like to do, depending on the manager, is have them read the book by Shane Parrish, Clear Thinking. And in there, he really talks about the pause, right? If there's something super important, let's table it. So we verify that we have all the correct information. We looked at all the we're not going to make a decision we can't pull back. And I think you need to get rid of all the other things that are filling that cup so you can use your best energy with your people, because ultimately that's really the best use of our time.
Yeah, I want to take that. And Kyle, I think you had something you wanted to throw in there, but I want to take that. The 4 quadrants, for those who don't know, quadrant 1 is urgent and important. And examples of that could be a crisis, a pressing problem, or deadline driven. And that's our business, man. I mean, especially back if it's 7 o'clock in the morning on the service line, you can't call it any other thing, right? It is quadrant 1, and our hair's on fire. For a sales department, it's Memorial Day weekend, and we're a Saturday at 2 o'clock. So we get it. We're not going to go away from that. But if we're living there, we're going to be drinking too much. We're going to have trouble in our marriage, and we're not going to be healthy in so many ways. The next piece, though, is the piece I think we all agree in this room, not urgent, but important. And the example, that's quadrant 2. And the examples of that would be relationship building, would be recognizing new opportunities, would be planning recreation, would be capability improvement, kind of what we're doing in this room right now. Short-term pain, getting here at 7 in the morning for me, but I love it. Long-term gain, getting to connect with you and getting to brainstorm with you, right? But this is capability improvement in what we're doing here. If you're at the gym right now and you're listening to this podcast, that's capability improvement. You're utilizing the gym to build your muscles, but you're also building the muscle of how can I be better, like you did with Gary V, right? That's great. Quadrant 3 is the one that probably deserves some discussion, but not today. I think we should do this again. It's urgent, but not important. That's a really weird place, man. I mean, what's that really look like? I believe it looks like, and again, we don't have enough time to deep dive into all of this, but I think it looks like somebody that's telling you to do it, and you don't really think it's all that important, right? And again, what does that really mean? And then the last one we did hit on is quadrant 4. And it's okay to relax, but if we're relaxing all the time, we're going to be broke. And we're going to be dead or broke, or dead broke, right? So the point is that what are we doing to utilize? How can we stay in quadrant 2 as leaders? And I think that we hit on that, and I'm glad we hit on that. But I think, again, you guys unpack so much. You talk, Kyle, so many different processes. What's step 1? So, Kyle, I'm going to throw you another question. You've got a brand new leader, young leader, service manager at a dealership. Maybe they were a top service advisor and they knew how to talk to people. Maybe they were charismatic. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just good with numbers. But let's say they're a charismatic leader and you put them in that position. What are the top 3 things that you want from them to get in the next month or 2 that you want them to get really good at?
Yeah, so I think, really breaking that down, because it matters where they came from too, because you see this all the time in your exact scenario. Let's say that person was an amazing service writer, right? And then they got promoted into this position. Or let's say they're an amazing shop foreman and they got promoted into this position, because it's usually one of the two, honestly. Sure. And so what we find immediately is, hey, you kind of like to go back to your comfort zone just as a human being, right? We all like to kind of get in our comfort zone. Well, guess where the service advisor is comfortable? On the drive. So guess where they spend a lot of their time? On the drive. Guess where the shop foreman's comfortable? In the shop. Where do they spend a lot of their time? And then now they're in this like manager role, and they're like, what do I do? They get kind of this feeling of, I'm not quite sure. I know I'm supposed to run some reports. The old manager did this, so I guess I keep doing that, right? They're really just not quite sure. And so they find themselves going back to the shop or back to the drive and kind of falling in that weird in-between stage. And I think step 1 is always understanding, hey, what is the most important thing, right? Is understanding, okay, what's the most important thing that we really want to achieve? And when it comes to the service department, it's, we love to complicate this business, right? We are great at complicating the most simplest things in the world, right? But the reality is we sell one thing. We sell time. Just happens to come with parts a lot of the times, but we sell time. So understanding really that most important KPI, right, is really driving the efficiency, that proficiency in the shop, the hours, and then understanding, okay, well, how do we get to that goal? because we see this all the time, and, Tom's mentored, hundreds of different managers at this point, right? And we always see, maybe they're trying to emulate what that old manager did. Well, let's say that old manager spent the first 2 hours every single morning, never got out on the drive at 7 a.m. because he was focused on getting his reports done, and it took him 2 hours to fill his reports because he had to send them to somebody, or whatever that process has always been. Well, they just continue with that behavior because they don't know any different. And so I think it's really analyzing and breaking down, okay, what is the most important thing? Where should you probably be focused at 7 a.m. in the morning as a new service manager, or just a service manager, period? Maybe what's going on the service drive, right? And then understanding, okay, well, can I run my reports just a little bit later? And I think a lot of times what happens is, we get a little nervous, right? I know, when I was a younger service manager, the last thing I wanted to do was walk up to my general manager and necessarily, not challenge him on something. But if I thought the expectation was X and I needed to be doing that by 8 a.m. every morning, well, guess what I was doing? Well, what if I went to him and I said, hey, I really want to be focused on the service drive right at 7. Could I get that to you just an hour later? Or could we do that just a little bit later because I want to do this and this is why? I don't know well, I know some GMs, but I don't know most GMs are going to be like, nope, you've got to do this. I don't want you to engage with your team on the service drive, right? So I think, really step one is understanding, hey, what is important, right? What's the number one thing that's important? And what does that end look like? What are we trying to do? Because everybody's situation is just a little bit different, but at the end of the day, we sell time. Right. And so understanding that most important KPI is really those hours in our store. And then everything else starts falling in place. Now, the last thing you want to do, right, is go in there and start changing things on day one. Right. The first 30 days, I would tell you, is a whole lot of kind of getting to know everybody, getting to know the processes. You might have some amazing ideas and you might think, okay, we just need to change this. But if you immediately start doing that, I don't know that's going to go that great for you. Versus, hey, if you wait, right, just a little bit, get to know everybody, and then start collaborating with all those key people. If there's something on the drive that you're just not quite sure, hey, this probably isn't the best process, well, who should you talk to about it? Maybe all the service advisors, probably the lot porter, right? What's going on? Who is in that department? Who's working in that department? And really understand, hey, let's collaborate and let's come up with a process together, because it, right? Then you instantly get buy-in from the individual. The rollout is so much easier because honestly, it's hardly a rollout because they feel like they built the whole thing because they really did build the whole thing. And it's just, hey, we're starting this tomorrow. Yeah, great. I thought we were starting it today, but perfect, right? And so everybody's bought in on that scenario. So, those are one of the things as a manager, for me, I knew I fell into this. Like I felt like I needed to take all the weight. Like all the weight was on my shoulders. I've got the title of the manager at this point, so I just felt like I either had to know everything or I couldn't show that I didn't know, which, Tom hit on earlier, the fact that, I know nobody has ran into this in the car business, but I've seen it a couple times, but there is people out there with egos and insecurity. I know we rarely see it in the car business, but it's out there, right? And the reality is I probably fell into that boat and I felt like I couldn't raise my hand or say, oh, and it was kind of all on me. Well, the moment I realized, I said, hey, I'm not quite sure, but we're going to go figure this out together. Yeah. Right. And we figure it out. We collaborate. We come up with whatever that process is. So as a new manager, it's not all on you. Don't feel like you've got to do every single thing. You've got to know every single thing, because it's just not the case. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I'm not quite sure, but I'm 100% committed to you and figuring this out and making sure it works perfectly. So I know Tom's got some amazing things he can add in that category, but that's where my mind immediately goes.
So I'm going to review a little bit. What I heard, you sell time. What you also said is don't jump in and just try to change everything right away. Get to know your people and get to know the processes. I love what Maxwell says, that so many times leaders walk into a business and they're smart. They know what they're going to do. They've got the agenda in mind. They try to put the agenda in mind before they get the people. in alignment, right? And the problem with that is without the people in alignment with your having your back, you're never going to get that process in place. If they're fighting you at the water cooler, you're done. And I love the fact that you said, let's collaborate, man. And I mean, think about that. The quality of our life is determined by the quality of our questions. Asking them, look, I've got this idea. I want to throw it out there. What would you do? And I think that's so powerful because I guarantee you, unless the guy retired after 50 years and this person took over for him, the person that was there before did not operate that way. Right. And then when they say, hey, I want to get you all together and have a discussion, tell you a little bit about what I've done in the past, get to know me, but also more importantly, get to know you. And by the way, we're going to get together weekly. We're going to talk about things. And I want to get ideas from you about how we can make this place better. I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact, I tell people this during coaching sessions. Some coaches believe they're up here and the coachee is down here. And I've got my hands at different levels if you're listening. And yet what I've heard, the best coaches come together in unity and say, I'm no better. We are going to walk through this together. We're going to do this in unity together. I am your accountability partner, but I'm going to do it with kindness. Yeah. So Tom, I'm going to flip it on you a minute, brother. And you can take that last question if you want, but also I'm going to let you pick the one here, bro. Kindness. You had a t-shirt on the other day that referred to kindness. Tell us a little bit about what that means to you when you're mentoring a leader. Because again, most leaders are positional leaders. They don't know. All they know is it's on my card. Now I'm the man or the woman. They don't know what that means at all. And they look at, especially in our industry, as, oh, you're one of those. You're from California, right? You're one that's weak. Well, it's not. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think the heart of it, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but it's really about accountability. And people want transparency and they want to know what they need to do and how to get there. And I think that's the difference between the kindness and nice. And I was super guilty early because I was a very big, I know this is hard to believe, relationship person, which I still am. But instead of utilizing accountability and transparency, I was overemphasizing relationship of how we want to get things done, right? Hey, well, if they like me, or hey, that we get good synergy, if I really know everything about, aspirations and such, but I wasn't really holding them accountable to where I need to be to help them, right?
So good.
And there are a lot of people that are in the gray in that area, right? All of a sudden out of left field, the performance isn't there. Right? Yeah. No matter what it is, whether it's a valet, whether it's a technician, whether it's a BDC person, but you're being too nice about, hey, you're going to get it. Don't worry about it. You're not being objective to exactly what the expectations are. And next thing you know, guess what you got to do on Monday morning, or our traditional method, right? Friday afternoon, is let that person go.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what did I do wrong? And you're thinking, well, how do you not know? Well, they didn't know, right?
Yeah.
So, we always talk about this, that people do not do things in the way that you expect them for a couple of reasons. One, they really don't understand why they're doing it, or they don't care. And more than likely, it's they don't understand why they're supposed to do it, or what the goal is specifically for them, or their department, before you get to the issue that they don't care. And hey, if you're holding people accountable, and if you put everything in place, you're creating transparency, great culture of improvement, and you get to they don't care, well, that's a very easy decision for both of you, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody feels bad, or as a manager, you don't feel bad about what you need to do in that situation because, hey, I've shown him or her exactly what the expectations are. They know exactly what they do every day. Hey, we collaborate and meet about it. We talk about, hey, where can I help? I see this is what you're doing. Hey, we want to try this. And if at that point you get to the point where they just don't care, well, hey, great news, right? We got an opportunity outside of the dealership for you. And I think it's that accountability. I'll tell a quick story. I know we're kind of running it in time, but, we worked with a new manager, and he never sat down and had any sort of development conversations with his technician, right? He was afraid of it. He was building relationships. They all liked him. You know, he grew up in the dealership, but he was afraid of what they would say if he said, hey, here are the things that I'm observing in your productivity or training, or hey, and here are the expectations of how you get there, what they would say, right? Because he's not used to that interaction.
Right.
Well, and we changed the narrative around. We don't call them reviews, we call them development plan meetings. And after he went through the process and did it the first time, he was absolutely shocked of the positive reaction from all of his technicians on, man, thank you. Now I know where I got to be to go do this. Oh, I understand I can't get that rate because here's what I need to improve on. Now he's morphed it into every person in his department. In fact, he's on his second round this week with his technicians. High retention, nobody left. Hours went up, camaraderie went up. He actually hired a few technicians, showed them the program that were actually making more money somewhere else, but never had a transparent career path or, hey, how am I going to get there? And hired those two technicians. And really, the great news there is he's building more self-confidence of being transparent and holding people accountable is really kind. Yeah. What he was doing before was creating a lot of anxiety, but he didn't realize it.
Love it. So good, Matt. I wish we could drill that down, but we can't today. But we talk about the 5 levels of leadership by Maxwell, right? And that 4th level is developing people. And that's usually in automotive where it falls apart. It usually falls apart at level 3 production. And maybe they're level 2 permission. They have good friends, but they don't know, like you said, about how to really hold them accountable. Then maybe it's production where they create maybe a stone on stone and there's conflict. But that developing people piece that integrates kindness and productivity and accountability and leads to confidence. And how does it lead to confidence? It leads to confidence because we start by asking questions. It leads to confidence because we just shut up and listen. And then it leads to confidence because now they start to trust us. And then because they trust us, now we can tell them what we mean without saying it mean. So you guys are studs, man. I certainly appreciate you being with me today. I loved our time together. Because there was the 3 of us, we got to have some more discussion, and I'm so glad everybody joined us. You guys, you have to be back because we need to take this to another level. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for what you're doing in automotive, and we really appreciate you. If people want to get a hold of you, why don't you guys give me the way that they can contact you guys?
Yeah, there's really 2 ways. Easiest way is to go to our website, right? It's www.visperio, that's Visperio.com. And we've got a lot of really great information, a couple videos on there that really walk you through exactly how we interact with your dealership and your group. And then we're active on social media, mainly LinkedIn, and you'll find us on LinkedIn. Send us a message.
Right on. That's how we met. Thank you. Yeah. Guys, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great holiday, and we look forward to talking again real soon. Thanks everybody for joining us. That was powerful. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so, and we'll see you next time on Keep the Change.